My name is Abigail Parker, and I'm 34 years old. I'm a financial manager based in Indianapolis. At work, I'm always putting out fires left and right, but I never could have imagined that waiting for me at my father's 55th birthday party would be a fiery ordeal. That caught me completely off guard. The lively atmosphere of the upscale downtown restaurant clashed sharply with the eerie vibe inside the private banquet hall. The moment I pushed open the door, the burst of laughter around the table came to an abrupt halt. As a financial manager in Indianapolis, I'm used to handling crises at work, but I never expected that my father's 55th birthday celebration would turn into a hangmen banquet, carefully orchestrated by my family just for me. The plates were long since cleared, and there were only a few bottles of wine left. Clearly, they'd already finished eating and were simply waiting for me, the latecomer, Abigail Parker. "Here's your bill, $5,500, my mother said flatly, sliding a leather folder across the table toward me. "This one's for you, Abby." Daniel, my older brother, broke the silence with a sneer, and immediately, my parents and cousins burst into raucous laughter. I stared at the number on the bill, my hands trembling uncontrollably. They knew full well I'd been late because of a client crisis, but they deliberately ordered the most expensive steak and the finest red wine, knowing perfectly well that, as always, I'd foot the bill. I'd always been the family's go-to firefighter, their ever-available personal banker. But this time, as I met their mocking gazes, years of pent-up anger and resentment surged up inside me all at once. Something within me simply collapsed. I didn't scream. Instead, I slammed the bill back onto the table, stood up in the dead silence, and turned around to walk out of the restaurant. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could feel it in my ears. I knew clearly this rift with my family was only just beginning. That I grew up in my parents' old house in Indianapolis, and from a young age, I was the family's problem solver. After my father, Henry, retired early due to knee problems, he spent his days at home complaining about bills. My mother, Betty, worked exhausting shift after shift at the supermarket. My 36-year-old brother, Daniel, stayed in the basement of our parents' house, pretending to be a designer yet never earning a stable income. I was the only exception in the family. Thanks to scholarships and part-time jobs, I managed to finish college and became a financial manager. Yet this very success ended up becoming an excuse for my family to keep asking for more and more from me. At first, it was just sporadic requests. I paid without hesitation for my father's $2,000 knee examination and my mother's $500 for a new refrigerator. But Daniel took it to the extreme. I shelled out $1,500 to buy him a computer to help him start a business, only for him to spend most of his time playing video games instead. Later, I even forked over $3,000 to replace the leaky roof at home. I'd thought it would be a one-time expense, but their demands only escalated. Every month brought a new reason: car repairs, utility bills, or Daniel's fanciful investments. My savings are dwindling day by day, and my dream of buying a home feels farther and farther away. Yet they never once ask how hard I'm working. Instead, they treat me like a walking checkbook. My father puts pressure on me with guilt, my mother subtly emphasizes family ties, and Daniel even demands money outright. I've tried to say no, but they label me selfish. The guilt weighs so heavily on me that I can hardly breathe. I should have realized long ago that I can't keep being their safety net. And then came my father's 55th birthday party, a perfect storm of all our simmering conflicts. That day, I'd been stuck at the office dealing with an urgent client issue. By the time I finally finished up and looked up, it was already 7 p.m., and my father's birthday dinner had already started. I rushed to the upscale restaurant in the city center. As soon as I stepped into the private banquet hall, I sensed something was off. My parents, Daniel, and my cousins had already finished eating. Empty plates were stacked high, and the wine bottles were nearly empty. My mother was the first to give me a cold, piercing stare, her tone laced with accusation. "Abby, you're finally here." Just as I'd apologized for being late to work, Daniel snorted and interrupted. "Always so busy, huh, boss?" My cousins joined in the laughter, while my father raised an eyebrow, took a sip of his drink, and completely ignored my embarrassment throughout. I forced myself to sit down calmly, but my mother abruptly pushed a leather folder toward me and said coldly, "Here's the bill." When I opened it, the amount $500 almost stopped my heart. It was all the most expensive cuts of filet mignon, vintage red wine, and lobster appetizers. "You want me to pay this?" My voice trembled uncontrollably, but my father just shrugged, as if it were perfectly natural. "Abby, you're doing so well now. You should share your success with your family." Daniel crossed his arms and sneered. "This one's for you, of course." The whole table burst into laughter again, as if it were only right and proper that I should foot the bill. Their cruelty pierced me like needles. I clenched the folder tightly, my mind racing with images of my dwindling savings and my ever-elusive dream of buying a house. They never cared how hard I'd been struggling. They treated me like nothing more than an ATM. I suppressed my anger and said calmly yet firmly, "I'm not paying for this." Then I pushed the folder back toward them. The laughter abruptly stopped, and my mother immediately burst into a shrill tirade, accusing me of being selfish. My father's face turned ashen. I'd had enough of their endless demands. I leapt to my feet, walked straight out of the room amid their stunned silence. Even the evening breeze couldn't cool the fire burning inside me. I knew clearly, this wasn't just a quarrel over dinner. It was the beginning of my breaking free from their control. The next morning, my phone kept ringing incessantly, showing 38 missed calls and countless angry text messages. When I woke up, my screen was flooded with notifications, and my heart sank as I scrolled through them one by one. My mother had sent a barrage of messages, each sharper than the last. "Abby, how could you humiliate us like this?" Another read, "You're so selfish. You actually walked out on your father on his special day." Dad's text was even colder and more direct. "We need to talk about your attitude." My older brother, Daniel, didn't even bother to send a text. Instead, he posted a cryptic status update on Facebook. Some people, once they land a good job, forget where they came from. The post received 12 likes, including several cousins who'd attended the dinner. My heart felt like it was being torn apart, not just because of what they said, but because of the public humiliation itself. They'd painted me as the villain, and they'd succeeded in doing so. By noon, my inbox was flooded with an email from Dad, titled, "Family Financial Agreement." I opened it, expecting to find an apology, or at least some explanation, but instead, I found a formal, icy printed document laying out a plan for me to pay $1,000 every month to support the family. In the email, Dad wrote that, given my success, it was now my responsibility to help cover their expenses, including groceries, utilities, and even Daniel's startup needs. The email ended with these words, "Abby, we've always been here for you. Now it's your turn to give back." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't love or family at all. It was a blatant demand wrapped in the guise of obligation. At work, I couldn't focus on a single thing. My boss noticed something was off and asked if I needed a break, but I just brushed it off. Their message weighed heavily on me, each one a painful reminder of the guilt I'd been carrying for years. I wanted to call them, to explain why I'd left, but their words kept echoing in my ears. Selfish, ungrateful. By evening, I was on the verge of breaking down. I sent a text to my boyfriend, Michel, asking him to meet me at a small cafe near my apartment. He worked as a bank clerk, a calm, dependable guy, completely different from the chaotic world of my family. I needed his perspective, someone who wouldn't judge me. In the cafe, sipping my latte, I told him everything. The birthday dinner, the $5,500 bill, even how I'd pushed the bill back. I showed him those text messages, the emails, and Daniel's Facebook status. My voice choked with emotion as I confessed just how trapped I felt, admitting that their years of constant demands had left me utterly drained. Michel listened attentively, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He didn't speak until I'd finished. Then he leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Abby, this isn't how a family should be. They're manipulating you, using guilt to control your wallet." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never heard anyone put the truth so bluntly, but he was right. He pointed out that Dad's emails weren't really requests at all. They were contracts, as if I were somehow indebted to them simply for being alive. Michelle pulled out her phone, pulled up Daniel's status, and shook her head. Abby, this is public humiliation. They're trying to force you to give in. He asked me to think about what I'd gained by giving them money, other than more demands, absolutely nothing. I sat there, my coffee growing cold bit by bit, as his words slowly seeped into my heart. For the first time, I saw clearly what my family had been doing. It wasn't love, it wasn't loyalty, it was carefully orchestrated manipulation, designed to keep me tethered to them forever. Michelle reached over and took my hand. You don't owe them your life, he said. You deserve to live for yourself. On the drive home, my heart was churning with mixed emotions. Relief, yes, but also anger. Relief because someone finally understood me, and anger because I'd allowed this situation to drag on for so long. I deleted their text messages, blocked their notifications, and filed away my father's emails. I'm not ready to face them again, not yet at least. But Michelle's words keep echoing in my ears, like a lifeline amid the chaos. I know I can't go on living like this anymore, can't let them keep pulling the strings over me forever. I've got to make a change, and that change has to start with me. A few weeks later, I drove over to my parents' place, determined to lay it all out for them. The two-story little house in the Indianapolis suburbs looked just as run-down as ever. Its walls were peeling, and the bushes had grown wild and untamed. The day before, my father had called me, his tone softer than usual, saying we needed to have a real talk as a family. I agreed, hoping for an honest conversation, but deep down I sensed it wouldn't be that simple. For weeks, they'd been relentlessly texting me, harassing me, and even sending that absurd monthly payment plan email. I'd already prepared myself to draw a clear line and put an end to it all. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and walked in. My heart was pounding like a drum. My parents and Daniel were already waiting in the living room. The old sofa had sunk under my father's weight, while my mother sat up straight, her hands tightly clasped together. Daniel leaned lazily against the chair, scrolling through his phone with barely a glance in my direction. Abby, it's good you're here, my mother said, her tone stiff yet forced to sound warm. My father pointed to an empty seat, holding a printed document in his hand, the very same family financial agreement from his email. We got to get this sorted out, he said, pushing the document toward me. The document laid out in detail a plan requiring me to pay $1,000 every month toward their expenses. I skimmed through it quickly, clenching my teeth. This wasn't a discussion at all. It was an ambush. I pushed the document back. I'm not signing this.
My voice was firm.
My mother's face darkened, and she began to lecture me endlessly about family responsibilities. Abby, we raised you. Couldn't you at least do this for us? Her eyes were filled with resentment. My father chimed in, his tone laced with disappointment. All your success is thanks to us. Don't suddenly turn your back on us now. Finally, Daniel looked up and gave a smug smile. Yeah, Abby, don't get all high and mighty. His tone dripped with sarcasm. That familiar feeling of guilt started creeping back in, but Michelle's words echoed in my ears. They're manipulating you. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Over the years, I've already given you thousands of dollars, medical bills, a new laptop, a brand new roof. When exactly are you going to stop asking for more? My voice grew louder and louder. My mother tried to interrupt me, but I didn't stop. I can't keep footing the bill for your lifestyle anymore. I'm barely holding on myself. The room fell utterly silent, and their faces were etched with shock and anger. Then Daniel rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, if only Dad hadn't hidden that $20,000 savings account, maybe we'd actually have needed your money more. The words exploded in the room like a bomb. My father's face froze instantly, and my mother's eyes widened dramatically as she shot Daniel a quick, furious glare. What savings account? I snapped, my voice sharp and piercing. Daniel hesitated for a moment, realizing he'd said the wrong thing. But it was already too late. You know, the one Dad's been saving in for years. He tried to cover up. It was meant for emergencies, and we didn't mean to hide it from you on purpose. My father immediately cut him off, his tone defensive. Abby, this was all for our future. We just wanted to test your loyalty, to see if you'd stand by us when things got tough. I stared at them, seething with rage. They'd been hiding $20,000 while forcing me to hand over every single penny I'd saved. This wasn't about need at all. It was about controlling me. I stood up, and the chair screeched across the floor as I pushed it back. "You've been lying to me." My voice trembled with fury. "You've made me drain my savings and give up on my dreams, all just to put me to the test." My mother tried to speak, her tone softening slightly, but I cut her off. "No, I've had enough. I'm not your bank anymore." I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking as I headed toward the door. My father shouted after me, "Abby, don't do this." But I didn't stop. Daniel yelled that I was ungrateful, yet his voice faded away the moment I stepped out of the house. The cool breeze outside brushed against my face, and for the first time ever, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom, as if a weight that had been crushing me had finally been lifted. But behind this freedom lies a deep-seated pain. They are my parents, my older brother, people I once loved and for whom I'd made countless sacrifices. Yet they've treated me this way, exploiting my guilt to keep me firmly tethered to them. As I drove away, tears stung my eyes, but my resolve only grew stronger. I'm never going back, not this time, absolutely not. A week later, sitting in Dr. and Parker's office, I finally felt as though I could breathe again. This little cottage in downtown Indianapolis, with its warm lighting and soft sofa, stood in stark contrast to the chaos I'd just fled. After leaving my family, I'd been struggling for weeks amid feelings of guilt and anger. It was a colleague who recommended Dr. and Parker, a therapist who specializes in helping people navigate family conflicts. During our first session, I told her everything: the birthday parties, the endless demands, the hidden bank accounts. Dr. and Parker listened attentively, and her calm demeanor put me at ease. "Your family is manipulating you with guilt," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "They've made you feel responsible for their problems." Her words echoed exactly what Michelle had said, but coming from a professional, they felt entirely different. For the first time, I saw clearly the role I'd been playing. I wasn't a hero. I was just a pawn in their manipulative game.
Dr.
And Parker helped me untangle years of psychological conditioning. She pointed out that my parents' expectations had instilled in me the habit of putting their needs first and neglecting my own. "Guilt is a powerful tool," she said, "but it's not your responsibility to solve their problems." Each therapy session gradually lifted a weight off my shoulders, replacing it with a clear and sober awareness. I started keeping a journal, recording those moments when I felt trapped, like the time I bought Daniel a laptop or the moment I paid for my father's medical bills. The process was painful, yet profoundly liberating, much like peeling away the layers of bandages from a wound, allowing it to finally heal. Next, I scheduled an appointment with Peggy Lewis, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. Her office was impeccably tidy, with financial statements pinned neatly to the bulletin board. I brought along my bank statements, feeling ashamed of the meager savings I had left. But Peggy didn't judge me at all. She carefully reviewed my records, her pen moving swiftly across the paper as she calculated every single sum I'd ever given to my family over the years: my father's $2,000 medical exam fee, Daniel's $1,500 laptop, $3,000 for roof repairs, and countless smaller expenses. The total amount really shocked me. In just 5 years, I'd given them a total of $25,000. Peggy said calmly. My heart sank as I realized how much I'd sacrificed to meet their demands. Peggy helped me create a budget and directed my money towards savings and investments. "You're not just rebuilding your financial situation," she said. "You're reclaiming the future that belongs to you." As my financial situation gradually stabilized, I needed something to help stabilize my emotions too. So I signed up for classes at a local yoga studio, a thing I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for. My first class was awkward. My downward dog pose felt like I was standing on a wobbly plank. But my instructor, Sarah, was incredibly kind and encouraged me to keep at it. A few weeks later, my body had grown stronger. My breathing had become deeper, and my mind had slowly begun to find peace. I met 2 friends, Lisa and Maria, during yoga class, and after the session, they invited me to join them for coffee. They were completely different from my family, They had no expectations of me and no hidden agendas. We talked about work, hobbies, and even our dreams. I felt a sense of belonging unlike anything I'd experienced before. At work, I threw myself wholeheartedly into my role as a financial manager. My boss noticed that I'd rediscovered my focus and entrusted me with a high-end project for an important client. I often stayed late, analyzing data and drafting proposals. Eventually, my hard work paid off. I was promoted to senior manager, and my salary went up too. For the first time, I felt proud of my career, not just as a means to support my family. I started setting boundaries, like turning off my phone after 8 p.m. so I wouldn't get their calls. The feeling of guilt still lingers, but Dr. And Parker's words keep echoing in my ears. Their problems aren't your problems. Michelle has always been my rock. One evening over dinner, he pulled out a notebook and helped me map out a financial plan for the next 5 years. Together, we set savings goals, outlined a timeline for buying a home, and even created a small fund for vacations. You're building a future for yourself now, he said, his eyes brimming with pride. His support wasn't just practical, it was deeply emotional, reminding me that I'm not alone. On weekends, we'd go hiking together, sit quietly sipping coffee and chatting, or simply enjoy each other's company in peaceful silence. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm I'd never known before. 6 months later, I'd become a completely different person. That woman who had walked out of her parents' house angry and wounded was still there, but she'd grown stronger and more determined. From that day on, I never spoke to my family again. Although it pained me deeply, I knew it was the right choice. My life finally belonged to me, no longer a ledger they demanded, but rather a canvas for my own dreams. On Thanksgiving, I drove to my parents' house. I knew this would be the last time I ever went there. The familiar 2-story cottage in the suburbs of Indianapolis stood ahead of me, its faded exterior walls glowing faintly in the twilight of November. For months, I'd been refusing their calls, but then my grandfather Norman called, urging me to join the family dinner and mend our rift. His voice was weak yet brimming with kindness, and that was the only reason I agreed to go. With therapy and Michelle's support, I'd already set new boundaries and felt fully prepared to face whatever might come. I parked the car, clutching the pumpkin pie I'd baked myself, and stepped into the house, a place filled with the aroma of roasted turkey and an air thick with tension. The dining room was packed with relatives, yet the atmosphere couldn't have been less festive. My parents sat at opposite ends of the table, their smiles forced and strained. Daniel sat listlessly beside them, poking at the food on his plate with a fork. Grandpa Norman sat quietly, his weathered hands clasped together. I found a seat and took it, feeling as though everyone's eyes were fixed on me. At first, the conversation had been light, chatting about the weather, talking about soccer, but soon enough, my mother leaned forward, her voice sweet yet laced with calculation. Abby, Daniel's car broke down, and the repair bill is really high. We think you could lend him a hand. Daniel nodded in agreement and added, You're doing so well these days. It's only right that you help out. My heart sank. Sure enough, they hadn't changed a bit. I put down my fork and said in a voice that was calm yet firm, I'm not paying this bill. The room fell instantly silent. My father's face turned bright red. Abby, he snapped, his tone sharp and cutting, these are family. You can't just ignore us like this. My mother chimed in too. You've always been there for us before. Don't suddenly become so selfish now. Their words stung, but I'd heard them all too many times already. Just as I was about to retort, my grandfather raised his trembling hand, silencing the room at once. Enough, he said. Despite his advanced age, his voice was surprisingly steady. All eyes turned toward him. Norman looked at me with warm yet sorrowful eyes. Abby, he said, when I was your age, I had a younger brother who kept borrowing money from me, every time with a new excuse and new need. I've given her absolutely everything, yet he just keeps asking for more and more. It's destroyed me. He paused briefly, his gaze sweeping across the entire table. What you're doing to her right now is exactly the same thing my younger brother did to me back then. She's not your bank account. The room fell utterly silent. My mother's face turned pale, and Daniel shifted restlessly in his seat. My father opened his mouth as if to protest, but Norman cut him off. Just let her live her own life. His voice trembled with raw emotion. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just because of what he'd said, but because of the deep-seated remorse I could hear in his own voice. I stood up, my heart racing yet strangely steady. I love all of you, but I'm done being your problem solver. I looked directly at my parents and Daniel and said, I'm never coming back. My mother gasped sharply, clutching her chest with a hand. Daniel scoffed and muttered, Good luck to you. My father just stared at me, his jaw clenched tight. I turned to Norman, shook his hand, then turned around and walked out. The door closed softly behind me. A cold breeze blew against my face outside, but inside, I felt a sense of relief, though that relief was tinged with sadness, the kind of sadness for the family I'd once dreamed of but never actually had. Several months later, I learned from a cousin that without my financial support, my parents could no longer afford their mortgage, lost their house, and had moved into a tiny rented apartment in the city center. Daniel, too, had given up on his unrealistic entrepreneurial dreams after losing my funding and found a job at a warehouse. Hearing this news didn't bring me any joy. Instead, it filled me with deep sorrow. Knowing they were struggling so badly only confirmed what I'd suspected all along. They'd always relied on me as a way to avoid facing their own responsibilities. Meanwhile, I bought a one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Indianapolis. On moving day, Michelle helped me carry boxes, and his laughter filled the empty space. We painted the walls a soft shade of blue, hung up photos we'd taken during our hikes, and even planned to host a small housewarming party with my yoga friends Lisa and Maria. As a senior financial manager, my job is incredibly busy, yet I still make time for yoga, therapy, and quiet evenings spent with Michelle. For the first time, I felt true peace, not because everything was perfect, but because my life finally belonged to me, truly and completely.